You arrive, not with drums, but dust, a plume announcing your approach like a hawk. Circling its prey, the desert speaks in patience, not volume, and the Kingdom of Kush listens. Here, Nubian queens the Kande govern not by decree, but by distance and water. Every caravan stop, every Hafir reservoir, every quiet transaction of gold dust shaped into cakes, threads a story of endurance across the dunes, the Kandex. Power glides along bronze scales and red pens. Her reach is traced not in battle cries, but in well-timed seals and silent ledgers. This is a tale of administration in sandals, where survival depends on correctly measuring powder in clay bowls, and where a queen's wisdom folds itself into quiet routines and modest tools. In these pages, we follow the path of a royal tax officer whose scales must remain fair, whose water jars must be full, and whose desert must continue speaking in balance. Your sandals are likely new. The last pair was lost to the Kordofan mud, swallowed by the drying lake. There is no turning back. Ahead lies the Abu Hamd caravan site, a day's walk from the last one. It is time to replenish the stores of dried fruit and grain, restock the water skins, and mend what the road has broken. The midday sun offers no respite. It is the season of the scorching winds, of burning grass and cracked earth. Soon it will be too hot even for the desert foxes to show themselves. When the royal convoy arrived at the Abu Hamd, there was talk of riches from the north, from the mines near the Red Sea. The queen had need of gold for an eternal flame, a funeral pyre fit for her father's spirit. He was the greatest king Kush had ever known, they said, and none greater would sit on the throne. She, a moon in her own right, would rule until another sun rose over the eastern hills. That was how they welcomed her, the queen and the heir, both named after the eternal flame. Both were to ensure their father's light would never dim. You shift the sacks of gold dust onto the trading post scales. They are heavy, seasoned with the grime of many journeys. You turn the cakes of gold on the broad platform, feeling the familiar heft, almost as precious as the metal itself, your birthright. To touch gold dust is to remember the source of your people's wealth, the deep seams in the Red Sea hills, the songs of the miners, their sweat mingling with the grit of the earth. Their labor goes into every grain of gold, just as yours goes into every transaction. And now the queen's caravan approaches. She sits apart from the others, shaded by a canopy of linen and acacia wood. Even here, her entourage feels like a forest in the open. You hold up two bowls, one filled with gold dust, the other empty. A fly buzzes impatiently above the cakes of gold on the counter. Time is a persistent fly, always circling, always hungry. It demands constant reckoning. She holds out a hand. In her palm, a bird made of gold dust, tiny and perfect, the size of a beetle. The queen must know the weight of everything. The queen must know the value of everything. You put the bird on the scale, it balances. It is heavier than it looks. The queen nods. Her gaze seems to gather the gold into itself, to understand its essence. Then she gestures to the rest of it. You gather the cakes and place them on the platform. The pile seems to shrink under her eyes. You measure it, calculate the nugget's worth. The queen waits. Her gaze is steady. You add the amounts and announce the total. The queen takes a small cake. She examines it, turns it over in her hand, then breaks off a piece and lets it fall like sand through her fingers. It is pure, unadulterated gold. It contains within it all the hopes and labors of the miners. The queen dips a finger into the bowl and smears some gold on her palm. She traces lines on her arm, then lets the metal trickle down her fingers. Some lands are rich with jewels, but Kush is rich with gold, and the queen holds its measure in her hands. And so the caravans moved. Month after month, gold passing through fingers lined with calluses and into vaults carved with lions and reed bundles, The Kandake's rule endured not in shouts but in shade canopies placed just so, in hafirs that stayed filled, inroads that didn't vanish with the next wind. The miners may not have seen the queen's face, but they knew her judgment was bound to the weight of their dust, clipped. With each fair transaction, each carefully tallied seal, Nubia whispered its will across the sand. No monument stands for the clerk who kept the weights honest, nor for the scribe who pressed the reed carefully enough to make a name legible after 2 moons of caravan travel. But the road remains, so do the practices. So do the quiet ways a kingdom remembers itself in fairness, in rhythm, in gold that wasn't just measured, but trusted. Roads of sand, scales of power you walk into the morning before the heat hardens. The sky is still pale above the eastern desert, and the camels move with that patient, deliberate sway that makes time pool and settle. Behind you, the Nile keeps its own counsel, a long ribbon of green threading north. Ahead, the caravan road stretches out over gravel and wind-cut ridges toward mines set in pale hills and black seams. Cook, if you listen. You can hear 2 rhythms, the soft clink of bronze weights in a scribe's pouch and the slow creak of leather as water. Skins shift against animal flanks. The caravan road is not a single line. It is a habit built over centuries, braided through the desert by the feet of miners, gold washers, soldiers, and messengers. Kid. It runs from towns in Kushnapata in the north, Marawi, to the south through dry wadis that smell faintly of acacia and dust. The route passes hafirs, those round, stone-shouldered reservoirs, the Meroitic builders shaped to catch seasonal rains. In a good year, the reservoirs hold a ring of dark water long into the dry months. In a lean year you find cracked mud whose pattern looks like old pottery. On the rims of these basins you see small arrangements that tell you this is a place of administration. A shade canopy of woven reeds. A bench, a post whose top is smoothed by hands. A big pot with a sealed lid. A set of scales wrapped in linen and hung from a peg. Here the desert's slow language meets state authority. You are in the world of the Kandekta queen, sometimes the queen mother whose image, carved in sandstone at Naka or Musawarat Izu Safra, shows her wearing a high crown and holding the curved stick of command. The Kandake rules with the king or in his stead, and some bear the title alone. Power in Kush is not a matter of loud proclamations. It arrives gently, in the regular appearance of scribes, the quiet taking of names, the way an inscription on a temple wall makes a pattern of offering that becomes a tax if repeated. You feel that power in the way your caravan halts under a piece of shade because shade has been provided here. Someone has planned the distance between this hafir and the next. Someone gathers the gold that will cross these boards. Gold is the slow fire that burns beneath all of this. It is in the hills, in quartz veins, in the beads that flash on a noblewoman's collar, in the thin foil that lines a ritual cup. It ties you to the merchants who wait downstream in Egypt, to caravans from the Red Sea that bring glass and wine, to a Roman official who hopes his accounts will show a surplus when he writes his yearly letter. But before it is any of those things, it is rock dust under nails. It is the scrape of pestle against stone. It is the shimmer of water in a wooden trough as crushed or is washed and the heavier flecks settle out. Miners in the eastern desert dig narrow shafts and push the stone to the surface. Women and men, bent to the work, crush and wash. They have the patient attention of people who know the rhythm of their task. They talk about wells and the price of grain. A boy watches a tired donkey blink in the sun. The gold that matters too. The Kandake begins as this, powder in a clay bowl, a little dull until the sun catches it. Taking a tax on gold can be done crudely or delicately. If you take too much, the miners disappear into side wadis, and sell quietly to anyone with the courage to make the trip. If you take too little, the court at Mero finds its storerooms thin when a shrine needs repair or a drought presses. You, as an official of the Kandik, learn to listen to the unremarkable details. How many days did the miners spend at the shaft before the last caravan? How many skins of water were used up at the last hafir? Did a well silt up and the second one have? Two be dug. These details mean more than a proud captain's report. They tell you how many cakes of gold, fused by the smelters into dull, rounded lozenges, will reach your scales this month, and how much the queen can commit to a temple feast without delaying a payment to a border garrison. The tools for this work are small and quiet. A balance scale with 2 pans and a beam of polished wood. A set of weights cut from stone and copper, each marked with a careful notch. A sack of clay seals little discs that can be pressed around a cord and stamped. With an official device, perhaps a lion or a reed bundle, a roll of linen, not for the gold but for the notes, strips on which your scribe writes with a reed in black ink, listing names, places, and amounts. When a caravan arrives, you do not count bags, you weigh. You place a cake of gold on one pan, and build the other pan with weights until the beam levels. The scribe calls out the number of each weight. The captain of the caravan listens. He is not interested in your politics, but he knows his animals will need dates and fodder for the return journey, and he wants to leave with the right number of seals tied to his empty sacks, each seal meaning his duty is done. The Kandik's reach extends through people who know how to be unnoticed at the hafir. The attendant pours water without ceremony, but he also notes how many skins each caravan takes. He tells you, softly, that the group from the southern shaft came with fewer donkeys than last time. At the temple were taxes in gold, care offered as a pious act. A priestess records the donor's name and the weight of the offering, not with a love of numbers, but with respect for order. Not all administration is done under painted ceilings. Much of it is in the shade of a tamarisk, sitting on a low stool, watching the sun move, carrying in your head a map of people's habits. You may wonder, as you sit with the scales, how a queen came to be at the center of this network. In Kush, power is often negotiated between king and queen, between royal bloodlines and noble families, between rituals that root authority in gods like a pedmok and the realities of wells that need cleaning. One queen, Amanirenas, will fight, roam when a governor oversteps at the border. Another Amanitor will sponsor building projects that make the kingdom's stones speak of order. In both cases, the quiet revenue of gold tax supports what the carved images promise. Without the measured weight of gold under your hand, the rituals at Naka would be short of incense. The soldiers at the cataracts would be short of sandals. The craftsmen who cut stone blocks for the lion god's temple would have to take their tools to simpler work. The road is an agreement made practical. It works because the Blemis and other desert dwellers are included, not ignored. Hugh. Drink their bitter tea around small fires at night and ask if a wadi further east has water. In return, the queen does not tax their herds harshly at the river crossing. When a hafir needs repair, a group from their tents comes to Holstone and tamp clay because it is in their interest that the caravan stops there and not somewhere else. The tax is a network of favors wrapped in formality. A seal on a court is a way of saying, this caravan is under the Kandik's eye. It will be treated with courtesy in the towns. Its goods are known and counted. You learn to read the desert like a chart of revenue. A cluster of tamarisk at a bend in the would not much shade, but enough to rest in midday and share a basket of flatbread and onion with a passing herdsman. A stretch of wind-polished gravel where the animals move more quickly, and you make up time lost at a bad crossing. A low ridge where the horizon dips, giving you a lookout to watch for dust that means another caravan is ahead. All of these things become entries in a mental ledger. if you can make the ridge by sunset, you will not spend the next morning's cool hour hunting for the trail at Meroe. The Queen's City, the hammering of iron is said to sound out like an extra heartbeat. Black slag heaps build up near the furnaces. Smoke leaves small ghosts on the air. People sometimes talk about iron as if it is the kingdom's signature. But here, in the desert, gold moves the slower, older economy. Squin when you return to the city. You carry a pouch of clay seals broken and replaced, a roll of notes with neat lines, and a few complaints. A huffier where a plank has split, a road marker fallen over, a scribe whose eyes are failing in the glare. These are the things the Kandek will address in council. Administration is care. The Queen's best gift to her people is not dramatic justice, but consistent service. The huffier repaired, the road lined up again, the shade canopy retied, the weights checked for fairness. Fairness matters because the scale is a delicate thing in human terms. If the gold pan rises too easily, the miners mutter about being cheated. If the weight pan is slow to balance, the caravan captain wonders if someone has filed the weights to be heavy. You bring the set out in public. You let people watch. You invite a merchant, a priestess, and a herder to put their hands on the beam, to put their eyes on the level. A tax that can be seen is not always a tax that is loved, but it is a tax that can be understood. And in a land where the written language is still partly a mystery to scholars even in your own day, the simple ceremony of weighing is better than any argument. Water sits under all this thinking like a quiet note. Every schedule, every appointment, every imagined revenue depends on reaching a well with water in it. The hafir is not just a circle of stone. It is a statement that the Queen keeps promises. A dry hafir makes other promises slack. If a caravan has to detour to a natural spring, it will reach the scales late. If it reaches late, the batch of gold you counted on to repair a bridge will arrive after the rains. Then your stones move downstream and you lose men hauling them back. You begin to see that gold taxes are not about money but about timing. Common things, planks, ropes. Water skins become the true instruments of wealth when they keep movement regular. On one of the days when the wind brings a small breath from the north, you make camp near a low shelf of rock. Scribe, careful of his tools as always, rubs lampblack and gum to make a fresh mixture of ink. The caravan captain loosens a girth strap, and the camel sighs like a man after a long walk. In the middle of this small, ordinary piece, a messenger arrives. His sandals are white with dust, and he carries a leather tube with a sealed letter. The seal bears the Queen's device. You break it as the scribe watches, and a small quiet gathers, like people listening for rain. The letter is brief. There has been a disagreement at the border. A Roman official has levied a fee on traders at the Cataract Fort, higher than last year and without notice. The Queen has sent a polite message. While she waits for an answer, she wishes to be sure that the gold tax does not waver. You read it twice, knowing that what is being asked is not about coins but about steadiness. Your mind goes practical first. If that Roman fee holds, the traders who buy gold downstream will have less to spend or will try to recoup their fee by driving down the price they offer. Either way, the tax you take here could feel heavier to the miners. They will not be angry at Rome. They will be angry at the nearest scale. You need to make small adjustments that say, "The Queen is listening." You might offer an extra seal for a caravan that keeps good time, a token to make the return journey easier at a ferry or a market gate. You might send a jar of dates to the miners at the southern shaft. A kindness that costs little but says the crown is not blind to their effort. But the letter does not end with a command. It ends with a question. What do you see? It is a simple way of asking for advice. The Kandik cannot be everywhere. She rules by the eyes and ears of those who sit under woven shade and count weights. You look around at the small scene you inhabit, the bronze scales, tea, the linen strips, the scribe blowing gently on fresh ink, the harsh line of the desert that looks softer at this hour, the camels folding their legs and settling with small grunts. Here is an answer to the letter, though it will not fit neatly on a strip of linen. Stability is built of these things. Q. Find yourself thinking that you will write back. The Hafir at the third waypoint is low. The weights should be checked by a second set in the next moon. The southern miners have a dull ache in their eyes from glare. A shelter with a mat roof would help. The caravan from the east came through 2 days earlier, signed the side wadi, has more water than usual that night. You lie under the plane of stars and think about the larger currents that the scales cannot touch but must still feel. Rome pushes and pulls with its appetite for Nile grain and gold ornaments. Gin in the south. Further than most maps, there are kingdoms whose names your scribe never writes because he does not need to. Their presence is felt in the way rare goods arrive once a year instead of twice. In the middle is your world of small balances. It is comforting, in its way. You cannot answer Rome's appetite, but you can make sure a plank at a Hafir is not loose. You can ensure that the set of weights has not been chipped by careless handling. You can ask the caravan captain about the new boy who walks at the rear, K, and whether his waterskin is properly tied. All of these acts are, in their modesty, acts of state. There is a quiet pride in being part of a queen's net of care. When people speak of the Kandake, they do not always talk about gold scales. They talk about temples and wars and processions. But in the markets, at the edge of the desert, at the water points, they speak in a different tone. They say, the queens. Men weighed fair. They say the Hafir was full. They say the road marker was newly set and the distance measured the way it was last year. These are compliments in a language of patience. They are also the foundations of endurance. A kingdom that does not keep its water, its roads, and its weights will not long keep its pride. As the section's day closes, you walk the perimeter of the small camp. The scribe snores softly. A goat lifts its head and then settles. The stars give the blank, generous look that deserts give them. You think again of the letter and of the question it ends with. What do you see? You see a delicate machine that runs on attention. You also see a horizon that holds uncertainties. The Roman fee. A dry season that might be longer. A rumor that a new vein of ore has been found deeper in the hills, which means the miners will need timber for supports that is not easy to find. In the morning you will weigh a new lot of gold and put fresh seals on cords. But as you lie down on your mat, one practical thought leaves a small itch. When the new vein draws people further into the hills, the old path to the Hafir will no longer be practical, so where exactly will you set the next shade canopy? And who will you send to measure the distance so that the queen's quiet? Network holds together without anyone ever having to mention the queen's ledger and the language of dusty you wake before the sun, as desert people often do. The air is still cool, and the wind has not yet begun its daily work of rearranging sand into new patterns. You sit with a bowl of millet porridge, sweetened with dates, and listen to the quiet sounds of the camp. The soft brushing of a camel's tail, the creak of a leather strap, the low murmur of a scribe reciting yesterday's entries to himself. The caravan is preparing to move, but you will stay behind for another day. A new batch of gold is expected from the southern shaft, and the queen's ledger must be updated. The ledger is not a book in the way you might imagine. It is a collection of linen strips, each marked with careful ink strokes, rolled and stored in clay jars. Each strip records a transaction, the weight of gold received, the name of the caravan captain, the date, the location, and sometimes a brief note about conditions. Hafir low, to donkeys lame, miners requested salt. These notes are not idle. They They form a language of dust and effort, a way for the Kandek to understand her kingdom not through proclamations but through patterns. You unroll a strip from last season and compare it to the new entries. The weights are consistent, but the names have changed. A captain who once brought gold from the eastern shaft is no longer listed, he asked the scribe, and he shrugs. He went north, he says, to trade in elephant tusks. Another name appears more frequently now, a woman, who leads her caravan with quiet authority and always arrives on time. You make a note to recommend her for a small honor, perhaps a token from the queen's treasury, a bracelet or a bolt of fine linen. These gestures matter. They say you are seen. The Kandek's rule is built on such recognitions. She does not need to shout. Her authority is in the way the ledger grows, in the way the Hafirs are maintained, in the way the caravan captains speak of her fairness. You remember a story told by an old miner, his voice dry as sand. He said that when Amanishakheto ruled, she sent a jar of honey to the miners every new moon, not because she needed to, but because it reminded them that their labor was sweet to the crown. You do not know if the story is true, but it feels true, and that is enough. Asterisk, the gold itself is rarely beautiful at this stage. It arrives in doll, cakes, wrapped in cloth, marked with symbols to indicate origin. You weigh each one, record the numbers, and seal them with the queen's stamp. The stamp is a small device, carved from ivory, showing a lion with a curved tail. It is pressed into clay and tied to the sack. When the sack reaches Meroe, the seal will be broken, and the gold will be melted, shaped, and stored. Some will go to temples, some to trade, some to pay soldiers, but here, in the desert, it is still just a weight on a scale. You think about the miners who brought it. They live in small camps near the shafts, their shelters made of stone and red. Their days are long and repetitive, digging, crushing, washing. They speak little, conserving energy. Their hands are calloused, their eyes squint against the glare. Q visited once, years ago, and saw a woman sitting by a trough, her fingers sifting through the slurry for flecks of gold. She looked up and smiled, and you saw that her teeth were stained from chewing acacia bark. She said, "The gold hides from those who rush." You never forgot that. The desert teaches patience. It teaches you to read signs, a change in wind direction, a shift in animal behavior, a new crack in a water jar. These signs are part of your work. If the wind carries more dust than usual, it means the dry season will be harsh. If the camels drink more water than expected, it means the wells are losing depth. You record these things in the margins of the ledger. They are not official entries, but they help you understand the rhythm of the land. The Kandek relies on this rhythm. Her court in Meroe is a place of ceremony and stone, but her power flows through the desert like water through a channel. She sends messages by runner, by caravan, by whisper. Her decisions are shaped by the reports you send, by the weights you record, by the notes you scribble in the quiet hours. You are part of her mind, an extension of her sight. It is a responsibility that feels both heavy and gentle. Today, a new caravan arrives. The captain is young, his face sunburnt, his voice eager. He presents his sacks with pride, and you begin the weighing. The gold is good, heavy, clean, well marked. The scribe records the numbers, and you press the seal, but something catches your attention. One of the sacks is slightly damp. "Q?" asked the captain, and he hesitates. "We crossed a flooded wadi," he says. "The water rose quickly. We lost a donkey." You nod and make a note. Floods are rare, but they change routes. You will need to send a message to the next Hafir, warning them to check the crossing. This is how the system works, not through grand decrees, but through small adjustments. A note here, a seal there, a warning passed along. The Kandek's kingdom is a web of such details, and you are one of its weavers. You do not seek glory, you seek balance. The scales must be fair, the roads must be safe, the water must be clean. If these things hold, the kingdom holds. You think again of the queen. You have seen her only once, at a ceremony in Meroe. She stood beneath a carved arch, her robes shimmering, her crown tall. She did not speak, but her presence was enough. People bowed, and the air felt still. You remember her eyes come, observant, slightly amused. She looked at the crowd as if she knew every name, every story, every weight of gold that had passed through the scales. You felt seen, and it stayed with you. The sun is high now, and the camp is quiet. The caravan has moved on, and you sit with the ledger, reviewing the entries. You notice a pattern. The southern shaft is producing more gold than usual, but the eastern shaft is declining. You wonder why. Is the ore running out? Are the miners leaving? Is there trouble with water? You decide to send a messenger to ask. Not a formal inquiry, just a visit, a conversation, a listening ear. Sometimes the best information comes from silence. You roll the linen strips and place them in the jar. You seal it with wax and mark the date. Another day's work, another set thread in the queen's tapestry. You feel tired, but satisfied. The system is working. The gold is flowing. The people are seen. The desert is speaking, and you are listening. As the sun begins to set, you walk to the edge of the camp and look out over the sand. The wind has picked up, and the dunes are shifting. You think about the miners, the caravan captains, the scribes, the queen. You think about the ledger, the scales, the seals. You think about the question she asked. What do you see? You see a kingdom made of patience. You see a network held together by trust. You see a future shaped by quiet decisions. But you also see a shadow on the horizon, change in the wind, a rumor of unrest, a whisper of ambition. You wonder, what happens when the gold runs thin, when the roads are no longer safe, when the seals are broken not by ceremony but by force? Asterisk the last caravan and the weight of memory. You rise with the first light, the desert still hushed in its pre-dawn stillness. The wind has shifted again, carrying a faint scent of tamarisk and dry stone. You know this scent well, it means the season is turning. The dry months will soon give way to the brief rains, and with them the caravan schedules will change. You sit beneath the reed canopy, sipping warm tea brewed from desert herbs, and prepare for what may be your final weighing of the season. The ledger is nearly full. The clay jar that holds the linen strips is heavy now, its contents a quiet testament to months of movement, labor, and care. You unroll a few entries, scanning the names and weights. You notice a pattern. Fewer caravans from the eastern shaft, more from the south. The miners at the eastern site are struggling. The ore is deeper now, harder to reach. Timber for supports is scarce, and the water table has dropped. You made a note of this weeks ago, but now the pattern is clear. The eastern shaft may soon be abandoned. You think about the implications. If the eastern shaft closes, the miners will move south or leave entirely. The hafia near the eastern road will fall into disuse. The shade canopy you helped repair last season will collapse. The road markers will be buried by sand. The Queen's network will shift, and you will need to adjust. You begin drafting a report, noting the decline, suggesting a new hafir near the southern shaft, recommending a redistribution of caravan support. These are not dramatic changes, but they matter. They keep the system alive. The Kandek's strength lies in her ability to adapt. She does not cling to old roots or resist change. She listens, she watches, she responds. You remember a story told by a caravan captain. an older man with a voice like gravel. He said that when Amanirenas lost her eye in battle, she returned to court, not with anger but with a new plan. She reorganized the border patrols, negotiated new trade terms, and sent gifts to the Roman governor. She saw more with one eye than most see with two, he said. You believed him. Today's caravan is late. You wait beneath the canopy, watching the sun climb. The scribe reviews the ledger, muttering to himself. A goat wanders near the water, jar, sniffing at the lid. You begin to wonder if the caravan has been delayed by weather or trouble. Then, just before midday, you see the dust faint at first, then growing. The caravan arrives, smaller than expected. Only 3 camels, 1 donkey, and a captain you do not recognize. He is young, nervous, his robes dusty and torn. He presents the gold 2 small sacks, carefully wrapped. You weigh them, record the numbers, press the seal. The gold is clean, but the weight is low. You ask about the shaft, and he hesitates. There was a collapse, he says. 2 miners, injured. The others are afraid to return. You nod and make a note. This confirms your earlier suspicions. The eastern shaft is no longer viable. You ask about the miners. He says they are resting near the old well, waiting for news. You decide to visit them. You pack a small bundle that's water, a jar of ointment, and set out with the scribe. The walk is long, the sun harsh, but you know the way. You arrive at the camp near dusk. The miners are quiet, their shelters low and worn. One man has a bandaged leg. Another sits with his head bowed. You speak gently, asking about the collapse, the conditions, their plans. They say they will move south, join the others at the newer shaft. They thank you for the supplies, for the visit, for the attention. You tell them the Queen is aware, that she will adjust the support routes, that their work is valued. They nod, and you see relief in their eyes. You stay the night, sharing a simple meal, listening to their stories. One woman speaks of her father, who mined the same shaft decades ago. He said the gold was stubborn. She laughs. It liked to hide. In the morning, you return to the camp. The scribe updates the ledger, noting the closure of the shaft, the movement of the miners, the change in caravan routes. You send a message to Meroe, recommending a new hafir, a shift in supply schedules, a reassessment of gold output. You know. The Queen will read it carefully, consider the details, respond with precision. You think again of the Kandak. Kur rule is not built on conquest or spectacle. It is built on attention, on the weight of gold, the depth of wells, the rhythm of caravans. She governs through people like you, through scribes and miners and captains. Her power is quiet, but enduring. You feel honored to be part of it. As the season ends, you prepare to leave the desert. The ledger is complete, the seals pressed, the routes adjusted. You pack your tools, say farewell to the scribe, and begin the journey to Meroe. The road is familiar, but you see it differently now. Each hafir, each marker, each patch of shade is part of a system, a network of care, of balance, of quiet strength. You arrive at the city, its stone walls warm in the sun. You present the ledger to the court, bow before the Queen, speak your report. She listens, nods, asks a few questions. Then she smiles, a small, knowing smile. You have seen well, she says. The desert speaks, and you have heard. You leave the court with a sense of peace. The work is done. For now, the gold will continue to flow. The caravans will adjust. The miners will find new paths. The Queen's network endures, not because it is rigid, but because it listens. As you sit beneath a tree in the city's garden, watching the sun set over the Nile, you think about the question she asked. What do you see? You see a kingdom held together by memory. by the memory of roots, of weights, of names, by the memory of fairness, of care, of quiet authority. You see a future shaped not by force, but by attention, and you wonder, in a world that often forgets the quiet ones, who will remember the weight of gold, the rhythm of caravans, the seal of a queen pressed into clay, story to Song Dynasty tea taxation and the quiet. Empire of stamped leaves the tea brick bureau, and the whisper of boiled water you begin your journey in the early morning mist of Sichuan, where the hills rise like folded silk and the air smells faintly of damp earth and camellia leaves. The Song Dynasty is in full bloom, and the empire's appetite for tea has become not just a matter of taste, but of policy. You walk along a narrow path lined with tea bushes, their leaves glistening, dipped with dew, and hear the soft rustle of pickers moving through the rows, their baskets filled slowly, methodically, with leaves that will be steamed, pressed, stamped, and taxed. Tea is no longer just a drink. It is a commodity, a currency, a ritual, and a bureaucratic concern. The Song Court, ever attentive to revenue, has established a system of taxation that turns leaves into bricks, bricks into stamps, and stamps into silver, QR. Part of this system, a minor official in the Tea Brick Bureau, stationed in a quiet town where the hills meet the river and the caravans begin their long journey north. Your office is modest, a wooden building with a tiled roof, a courtyard, shaded by bamboo, a storeroom filled with stamped bricks wrapped in paper. Each brick weighs about 2 catties pressed into a rectangular shape and marked with the imperial seal. The seal is not decorative, is a statement of legitimacy. Only stamped bricks may be sold in the markets. Unstamped bricks are contraband, and their presence in a merchant's cart can lead to fines, confiscation, or worse, a lecture from a senior official whose tone is more exhausting than any. Punishment: you begin your day with a bowl of kanji and a cup of tea brewed from broken leaves too coarse for sale, but good enough for morning clarity. You review the ledger, noting the number of bricks stamped yesterday, the names of the merchants who passed through, the weight of leaves received from the pickers. The numbers are not dramatic, but they matter. A shortfall in bricks means a delay in revenue. A surplus means the storeroom must be expanded. You send a message to the carpenter, requesting new shelves. The pickers arrive mid-morning, their baskets full. You inspect the leaves, checking for quality, moisture, and consistency. The leaves are steamed, then pressed into molds. The molds are lined with cloth, and the pressing is done with wooden blocks weighted by stones. The bricks are dried in the shade, then stamped with the seal. You watch the process with quiet satisfaction. It is slow, deliberate, and oddly soothing. The rhythm of pressing and stamping is like a heartbeat, a steady pulse of bureaucracy. The merchants arrive in the afternoon, their carts creaking, their voices low. They present their permits, pay the tax, receive their bricks. You record each transaction in the ledger, noting the destination, the quantity, the seal number. Some merchants chat about the weather, the road conditions, the price of salt. Others say little, focused on their journey. You offer them tea, a gesture of courtesy. Most accept, sipping quietly, grateful for the warmth. You think about the journey these bricks will take, north to the capital, east to the coast, west to the frontier. They will be traded for grain, silk, horses, and favors. They will be brewed in scholar studies, in soldiers' tents, in farmers' huts. They will be part of poems, of letters, of quiet conversations. And each brick will carry the seal of your bureau, a small mark of order in a vast and shifting world. The tea tax is not universally loved. Some say it burdens the poor, inflates prices, stifles trade. Others say it funds roads, schools, and temples. You do not argue. You weigh, stamp, record. You believe in the system, not because it is perfect, but because it is consistent. The seal means something. It means the brick has passed through hands that care. You remember a story told by an old merchant. His beard white, his eyes sharp. He said that during a flood he lost half his cargo, but kept the stamped bricks dry. The seal saved me, he said. The officials believed me. They let me pass. You nodded, understanding. The seal is trust, and trust is currency. As the sun sets, you walk through the courtyard, listening to the rustle of bamboo. The air is cool, and the scent of tea hangs gently. You think about the pickers, the pressers, the merchants, the drinkers. You think about the emperor, who may never see a stamped brick, but whose policies shape your day. You think about the ledger, the seal, the quiet authority of routine. You sit with a fresh cup of tea, watching the steam rise. The water was boiled over a charcoal brazier, the leaves steeped for just the right time. The flavor is mild, earthy, calming. You sip, slowly, letting the warmth settle. You wonder, what happens when the seal fades, when the bricks are broken, when the tea is brewed and gone? What remains of the system, of the care, of the quiet work? Asterisk, ledgers, leaves, and the bureaucracy of taste. The next morning begins with a drizzle, soft and persistent, soaking the tiled roofs and turning the courtyard stones slick with moss. You step carefully, holding your ledger close, the ink still drying from yesterday's entries. The bamboo sways gently, and the scent of wet earth mingles with the faint aroma of tea leaves being steamed in the workshop behind the bureau. It is a quiet day, the kind that makes the work feel slower, more deliberate. Inside, the stamping room is warm and humid. The bricks are lined up on wooden racks, each one waiting for its seal. The seal itself is a small brass stamp carved with the emblem of the Tea Brick Bureau, a stylized camellia leaf surrounded by 4 characters that read Imperial Standard Commodity. You press the stamp into the clay seal, then affix it to the brick with a dab of rice paste. The paste dries quickly, holding the seal firm. You do this dozens of times, your hands moving with practiced ease. The scribe sits nearby, recording each brick's serial number in the ledger. His brush moves slowly, deliberately, the strokes neat and precise. He pauses occasionally to sip tea from a small porcelain cup, then resumes his work. You admire his discipline. The ledger is the heart of the bureau, the record of every transaction, every shipment, every seal. It is not just a book, it is a map of trust. Outside, a merchant arrives with a cart covered in oilcloth. He bows politely, presents his permit, and waits as you inspect the bricks. They are stamped correctly, wrapped in paper, tied with twine. You count them, weigh them, record the numbers. He pays the tax in silver ingots, each one marked with a chop. You place the ingots in the strongbox, then offer him a cup of tea. He accepts, sipping quietly, watching the rain. He tells you a story. In the capital, he says, there is a scholar who brews tea with water drawn from a well fed by mountain springs. He uses a clay pot fired in a kiln known only to a few artisans, and he steeps the leaves for exactly 3 breaths. He says the taste reveals the soul of the dynasty. The merchant chuckles. You smile, knowing that taste is often a matter of ritual as much as flavor. The Song dynasty is a world of rituals. Tea is not just consumed, it's performed. Scholars write essays on the ideal temperature of water, the shape of cups, the timing, of infusions. Officials host tea gatherings where poetry is recited and comparisons are made between bricks from different regions. Even the emperor is said to have a favorite blend, pressed from leaves grown in a shaded grove near Mount Mengding. Think about the pickers who harvested those leaves. Their hands are stained green, their backs bent from hours in the fields. They know which bushes yield the best flavor, which leaves to avoid, which times of day produce the most fragrant harvest. Their knowledge is quiet, passed down through generations, rarely written but deeply felt. You respect them, even if the court never mentions their names. In the storeroom, the bricks are stacked neatly, each one a small monument to labor. Run your fingers along the edges, feeling the texture of pressed leaves. Some bricks are darker, richer, made from older leaves. Others are lighter, more delicate, made from buds picked at dawn. You know the difference, even if the tax is the same. The seal does not distinguish flavor, it only marks legitimacy. You wonder about the drinkers. In a village near the frontier, a soldier brews tea over a fire made from yak dung. In a coastal town, a fisherman drinks tea with dried shrimp. In the capital, a noblewoman sips tea while reading a scroll of Tang poetry. Each cup is different, but each begins with a brick stamped in your bureau. You find comfort in that connection, a thread of routine that links distant lives. The rain continues, and the courtyard fills with puddles. You send a boy to check the roof for leaks, then return to your desk. The scribe hands you the ledger, and you review the entries. One shipment stands out, a large order bound for the western provinces, paid in advance, marked urgent. You ask the merchant about it, and he hesitates. There's unrest, he says. The officials want to keep the soldiers calm. Tea helps. You nod, understanding. Tea is more than a drink. It is a balm, a ritual, a reminder of order. In times of uncertainty, the familiar taste of stamped leaves can soothe nerves, restore focus, reaffirm identity. You make a note to expedite the shipment, then send a message to the warehouse to prepare the bricks. Later, you sit with the scribe, reviewing the month's totals. The numbers are steady, the revenue consistent, the system is working. You feel a quiet pride not in wealth, but in stability. The tea tax is not glamorous, but it is reliable. It funds roads, schools, temples. It supports the pickers, the pressers, the merchants. It sustains the rituals that define the dynasty. As the day ends, you brew a fresh pot of tea. The leaves are from a batch pressed last season, mellow and earthy. You sip slowly, watching the steam rise. The rain has stopped, and the courtyard glows with reflected light. You think about the scholar in the capital, the soldier on the frontier, the pickers in the hills. Think about the seal, the ledger, the quiet authority of routine, and you wonder what happens when the rituals fade, when the stamps are no longer trusted, when the taste of tea no longer carries the weight of empire. The taste of order, and the echo of leaves. The final days of the season arrive with a crispness in the air that makes the tea steam rise more sharply from your cup. The hills around the bureau are turning golden, the camellia bushes trimmed back after harvest, their leaves drying in neat rows beneath woven mats. You walk slowly through the courtyard, ledger in hand, feeling the weight of months of quiet labor. The stamped bricks are stacked in the storeroom, the seals pressed, the taxes collected, the system has held. Inside, the scribe is finishing the quarterly report. His brush moves with the same deliberate rhythm you've come to associate with trust. He pauses to blow gently on the ink, then hands you the scroll. Read it carefully. The number of bricks stamped, the silver collected, the shipments dispatched. There are no surprises. The numbers are modest, but they speak of consistency. You sign the report and seal it with the bureau's chop. A messenger arrives from the capital, his robes dusty, his face drawn. He carries a letter from the Ministry of Revenue, folded in silk and marked with the imperial seal. You open it slowly, the paper crisp and faintly scented with sandalwood. The letter is brief. It praises the bureau's efficiency, notes the stability of revenue, and requests a small increase in output for the coming season. You nod, unsurprised. The empire is always hungry for order. You think about the emperor not as a figure of grandeur, but as a man who drinks tea each morning, perhaps from a stamped brick that passed through your hands. You imagine him seated in a quiet chamber, the steam rising from his cup, the taste familiar, grounding. He may never know your name, but he knows the seal. That is enough. The merchants begin to arrive for the final shipments. Their carts are lighter now, their voices softer. They speak of winter preparations, of roads that will soon be impassable, of markets that will slow. You stamp the bricks, record the numbers, offer tea. One merchant, older than most, tells you a story. He says that in a village near the northern border, the arrival of stamped tea bricks is celebrated with a small ceremony. The villagers brew the first pot together, recite a poem, and give thanks for the taste of order. You smile, moved by the image. The seal you press each day is not just a mark of taxation, is a symbol of connection. It links the hills of Sichuan to the villages of the frontier, the pickers to the drinkers, the bureaucracy to the ritual. It is a quiet thread that holds the empire together. You visit the pressing room one last time before the season ends. The molds are clean, the stones stacked, the cloths folded. The workers sit in the shade, sipping tea, their hands stained but steady. You thank them for their labor, offer a small bonus, and listen as they speak of their families, their hopes, their plans for the winter. Their words are simple, but they carry the weight of continuity. In the storeroom, the final shipment is prepared. The bricks are wrapped, sealed, loaded onto carts. You watch as the merchants depart, their wheels creaking, their shadows long. You feel a quiet satisfaction. The work is done, the system intact, the taste of tea ready to travel. You sit beneath the bamboo, sipping your own cup. The leaves are from a special batch, pressed with care, aged for flavor. The taste is deep, earthy, calming. You close your eyes, letting the warmth settle. You think about the pickers, the pressers, the merchants, the drinkers. You think about the seal, the ledger, the quiet authority of routine. And you wonder, in a world that changes with each season, what remains? Is it the taste of tea, the memory of order, the echo of leaves pressed into bricks and stamped with care? You do not know, but you believe in the seal, in the ledger, in the quiet work. And as the sun sets over the hills, casting long shadows across the courtyard, you feel the comfort of a system that listens, that adapts, that endures. Story 3. Mansa Musa's Salt Caravans and the Ledgers of Tagaza, the weight of salt and the silence of Sandu, begin in the wide, wind-swept emptiness of the Sahara, where the horizon is a line drawn by heat and the dunes shift like slow breath. Soon the sun is high, the air dry, and the caravan moves with the patience of centuries. Camels sway under heavy loads, their hooves pressing soft indentations into the sand. You walk beside them, your robes dusted with salt, your ledger tucked inside. A leather pouch. You are a clerk of the Mali Empire, assigned to the salt route between Tagaza and the heartland. And your job is to count. Salt is not glamorous, but it is essential. In the 14th century, under the reign of Mansa Musa, salt is currency, medicine, preservation, and ritual. It is traded for gold, millet, cloth, and slaves. It is stored in blocks, carved from the crusted earth of Tagaza, stacked like bricks, and loaded onto camels for the long journey south. Each block weighs about 30 kilograms, and each camel carries 4. You count them, record them, seal them with the mark of the empire. Tagaza is not a city in the usual sense. It is a place of salt and silence. The buildings are made of salt blocks, the walls white and crumbling, the roofs covered with mats. The workers live in harsh conditions, their skin cracked, their eyes squinting against the glare. They dig shallow pits, scrape the crust, shape the blocks, and stack them in neat rows. The air smells of brine and sweat. You respect them, even if your ledger does not record their names. Your office is a tent near the edge of the pits, shaded by woven reed panels. Inside, you keep the tools of your trade, a balanced scale, a set of weights, a bundle of parchment, a jar of ink, and a stamp, carved from ebony. The stamp bears the symbol of Mansa Musa's administration, a stylized sun above a pair of crossed spears. You press it into clay seals, affix them to the salt blocks, and record the numbers in your ledger. Each caravan is a small world. The camel drivers speak in low tones, their language a mix of Arabic, Saninc, and Berber. They carry water skins, bundles of dates, and stories. They know the desert's moods, the location of wells, the signs of danger. You listen to them, not because it is required, but because their knowledge is older than your ledger. They speak of mirages, of lost caravans, of oases that bloom once every 10 years. You make notes in the margins. The salt blocks are loaded with care. Each one is wrapped in cloth, tied with rope, marked with a seal. The camels kneel, groaning softly, then rise with their burdens. The caravan sets out at dawn, moving slowly, steadily, toward the Niger River and the cities beyond. You watch them go, then return to your tent to update the ledger. You record the number of blocks, the names of the drivers, the date, the destination. You seal the parchment and place it in the archive chest. Mansa. Musa's empire is vast, and salt is its lifeblood. Gold may be more famous, especially after the emperor's legendary pilgrimage to Mecca, but salt is what feeds the people, preserves the meat, heals the wounds. It is traded in Timbuktu, Gao, and Niani. It is stored in warehouses, taxed by officials, measured by scribes. You are one of those scribes, and your work is quiet but vital. You remember a story told by an elder clerk, his beard white, his fingers stained with ink. He said that when Mansa Musa returned from Mecca, he brought scholars, architects, and books, but he also brought a new system for recording salt. He understood that wealth is not just gold, the clerk said. It is order. Hugh believed him. The desert teaches order. The caravan must move at a certain pace, rest at certain wells, avoid certain paths. The salt must be loaded evenly, sealed properly, recorded accurately. A single mistake, a missing block, a broken seal, a wrong entry can disrupt the entire system. You check your work twice, sometimes 3 times. Q. Trust your memory, but you trust your ledger more. At night you sit by a small fire, sipping tea brewed from desert herbs. The stars are sharp above you, the silence deep. You think about the salt blocks stacked in the pits, the camels moving through the dunes, the cities waiting for their arrival. You think about Mansa Musa, seated in his palace, reading reports, planning routes, adjusting taxes. You think about your own role, a small part of a vast machine. You wonder what happens when the salt runs low, when the pits dry up, when the caravans falter. What happens to the ledger, the seal, the quiet authority of routine? The caravan's pulse and the bureau of dust. The caravan moves slowly, as it always does. You've joined it this time not as a driver, but as an observer, a clerk with a ledger and a seal, tasked with verifying the route and recording the rhythms, chaos of trade. The camels sway, their shadows long against the sand. The salt blocks creak in their bindings, and the drivers hum low songs to keep the pace. You ride a donkey, less noble than a camel, but easier to manage when your hands are full of parchment and ink. The desert is not empty. It is a ledger of its own, written in wind and stone. You pass old markers, piles of rock left by previous caravans, signs of wells, warnings of soft sand. You note them in your journal, not because they are new, but because they are changing. K marker, once tall, is now half buried. A well once reliable is now dry. You make a note to report these shifts. The empire depends on accuracy. At the midpoint of the journey, the caravan stops at a known rest point, a shallow depression with a few acacia trees and a well lined with stone. The water is brackish but drinkable. The drivers unpack their bundles, feed the camels, stretch their legs. You set up your tent and begin your work. You count the salt blocks, check the seals, record the condition of the cargo. One block is cracked. You mark it, stamp it, and note the damage. It will be taxed differently. The drivers gather around the fire, sharing dates and stories. You listen, as always. One speaks of a sandstorm that buried a caravan for 3 days. Another tells of a trader who tried to pass unstamped salt through Gao and was fined a year's wages. They laugh. But the lesson is clear. The seal matters. It is not just a market, it is a promise. You feel the weight of that promise in your pouch, where the stamp rests wrapped in cloth. You think about the cities waiting for this salt. In Timbuktu, scholars brew tea with it. In Niani, cooks use it to preserve fish. In Gao, healers mix it with herbs for wounds. Each block is part of a chain of survival. You record the destinations, the expected arrival dates, the names of the merchants who will receive the cargo. You send a runner ahead with a copy of the ledger, sealed with wax. The empire must know what is coming. The next leg of the journey is harder. The dunes are taller, the wind stronger. The camels groan under their loads, and the drivers wrap their faces in cloth. You ride in silence, watching the horizon. You think about Mansa Musanot, the gold-laden pilgrim of legend. But the administrator, the planner, the man who understood that wealth must be measured, tracked, and protected. You think about the salt blocks, each one a unit of trust. At night, you sit with the drivers, sharing a pot of millet porridge. One asks about your work. You explain the ledger, the seals, the taxes. He nods, then asks, "Do you ever wonder where it all goes?" You pause. You've seen the warehouses, the markets, the kitchens, but you've never followed a block of salt to its final use. You make a note. Next season, request permission to visit the receiving end of the route. The caravan reaches the river. The water is wide and slow, the banks lined with reeds. Boats wait to carry the salt downstream. You oversee the transfer, checking each block, each seal, each entry. You record the names of the boatman, the weight of the cargo, the condition of the river. You send another copy of the ledger to the capital, marked urgent. The salt is moving, and the empire must know. You stay behind for a few days, watching the boats depart. You speak with local officials, compare ledgers, verify stamps. You find a discrepancy, 2 blocks missing, 1 seal broken. You investigate. The boatman says the blocks were damaged during loading. You inspect the site, find traces of salt in the sand, confirm the story. You adjust the ledger, file a report, send a message to the Bureau of Trade. The system corrects itself, you think. Gang. Again about the question, where does it all go? Q. You imagine a kitchen in Niani, a healer in Gao, a scholar in Timbuktu. You imagine the salt dissolving in water, disappearing, leaving only its effect. You realize that your work is like that. The ledger is not the salt, it is the trace. The seal is not the cargo, it is the memory. As you prepare to return to Tagasa, you sit by the river, watching the boats fade into the distance. Q. Sip tea brewed with river water and a pinch of salt. The taste is sharp, grounding. You think about the empire, the roots, the seals, the blocks. You think about the desert, the ledger, the quiet authority of routine, and you wonder what happens when the river floods, when the boats sink, when the seals are forged. What happens to the trust, the system, the quiet work? Asterisk the seal, the scholar, and the vanishing block. You return to Tagaza with the wind at your back and the ledger tucked beneath your arm. The desert has shifted again, dunes moved, markers buried, a well gone dry. You note these changes, knowing they will affect the next season's route. The caravan is smaller now, the camels lighter, the drivers quiet. The salt has been delivered, the taxes collected, the seals pressed, but one block is missing. It was marked in the ledger, sealed, loaded, and recorded, but at the river it was not found. The boatman swore it was damaged, but the fragments were never recovered. You filed the report, adjusted the numbers, sent the message, but the block remains unaccounted for. It is a small thing, one block among hundreds, but it lingers in your mind. Back in Tagaza, the pits are quiet. The workers rest. The salt crusts harden. The buildings crumble slightly more. You sit in your tent, reviewing the season's entries. The numbers are good. The system held. But the missing block nags at you. You decide to investigate not as an official, but as a curious clerk. You begin with the drivers. They remember the block heavy, clean, marked with a fresh seal. They loaded it onto the camel, tied it securely, watched it sway with the others. Nothing unusual. You check the seal records. The stamp was correct, the clay firm, the ink dry. You check the boatman's logs. He recorded the block, then crossed it out. Damaged, he wrote. But the fragments were never found. You travel to Gao, where the block was meant to arrive. You speak with the merchant, a quiet man with a tidy shop. He shows you his inventory, his receipts, his salt. The missing block is not there. He shrugs. Sometimes things vanish. He says, the desert takes what it wants. You nod, but you are not satisfied. You visit a scholar in Timbuktu, a man known for his knowledge of trade routes and ledgers. You show him your records, explain the discrepancy. He listens, sips tea, then smiles. You are chasing a ghost, he says. But ghosts teach us. You ask what he means. He explains that the system is not just about salt, it is about memory. The missing block is a reminder that no system is perfect, that every seal is a promise, not a guarantee. You return to Tagaza with this thought. You sit by the pits, watching the workers shape new blocks. You press the seal, record the numbers, update the ledger. The missing block is still gone, but its absence has become part of the record. You write a note in the margin. One block vanished. No fragments found. Trust remains. You think about Mansa Musanot, the emperor of gold, but the ruler of systems. He understood that wealth must be tracked, that trust must be earned, that even salt must be sealed. You think about the scholar's words. The merchant shrugged, the boatman's crossed out line. You think about your own role, not to prevent every loss, but to record it, to learn from it, to continue. The season ends. The ledger is full. The seals are pressed. The blocks are stacked. You sit in your tent, sipping tea brewed with salt from a block you stamped yourself. The taste is sharp, grounding. You feel the comfort of routine, the weight of memory, the quiet authority of care. And you wonder, in a world of shifting sand and vanishing blocks, what endures? Is it the salt, the seal, the ledger, the attention we give to each? Asterisk, Heion, court, ink grinding, paper inventories, and midnight poetry receipts, asterisk the quiet bureau of brushes and the weight of words you begin in Kyoto, in the twilight hush of the Heian court, where the scent of incense lingers in the corridors and the sound. of silk brushing against polished floors is the loudest thing you'll hear all day. The year is somewhere in the 11th century, and you are a clerk in the Bureau of Stationery, a small office tucked behind the eastern wing of the imperial compound, responsible for the most delicate of duties, managing the court's supply of ink, paper, brushes, and poetry receipts. Your work is not glamorous. You do not write the poems that will be read aloud at moon-viewing banquets or exchanged between lovers in folded fans. You do not compose the seasonal greetings that glide across lacquered trays. You count, you grind, you inventory. You ensure that the court's endless flow of words has the material it needs to exist. The day begins with ink. Q. Sit at a low table, a stone slab before you, and begin the slow, meditative task of grinding an ink stick against the moistened surface. The stick is made of soot and glue, pressed and dried, carved with characters that speak of longevity, clarity. You grind in circles, adding water drop by drop, until the mixture is smooth and dark. You pour it into a ceramic dish and set it aside. This ink will be used by a lady waiting to write a poem about plum blossoms. She will not know your name, but she will notice the richness of the black. Next, you check the paper inventory. The Bureau maintains dozens of typestick mulberry sheets for formal correspondence, thin rice paper for poetry, tight papers for seasonal greetings, embossed sheets for imperial edicts. Each type is stored in a cedar cabinet, labeled with a brushstroke and a small charm to ward off insects. You count the sheets, record the numbers, note any damage. A mouse has nibbled the corner of a stack of pale blue paper. You mark it for disposal and send a message to the papermakers in Ekason. Brushes are more personal. Each courtier has preferences: soft bristles for flowing script, stiff ones for precise characters, handles carved from cherry wood or wrapped in silk. You maintain a quiet ledger of these preferences, noting who favors which style, who needs replacements, who has returned a brush with the bristles worn to a nub. You send a request to the brushmaker, specifying the length, the weight, the balance. He will deliver them in a week, wrapped in cloth and tied with twine. The poetry receipts, curt, are the strangest part of your work. Each time a poem is exchanged between courtiers, between lovers, between rivals, a receipt is filed. It records the sender, the recipient, the occasion, the paper used, the brush type, the ink batch. It does not record the poem itself. That is private. But the receipt is a trace, a shadow, a way of saying, this moment mattered. You file them in scroll boxes, organized by season, tied with silk cords. You do not read them, but you feel their weight. You remember a story told by an older clerk, his hands stained with ink, his voice soft. He said that once a lady in waiting sent a poem on chrysanthemum-dyed paper, written with ink ground during a thunderstorm. The recipient kept the paper for years, never replying, until one night he returned it with a single line. The ink still holds the rain. The receipt recorded the exchange, but not the silence between. You believed him. The Heian court is a world of surfaces and subtleties. Status is measured in the quality of one's handwriting, the timing of one's reply, the choice of paper. You navigate this world through ledgers and inventories, ensuring that the materials of expression are always available, always appropriate. Q. Do not judge the words. You support them. At midday you deliver a batch of ink to the western wing, where a poetry contest is being prepared. The courtiers nod politely, barely acknowledging you. You place the dishes on a lacquered tray, bowl, and leave. You return to your office, update the ledger, and begin grinding a new stick. The rhythm is soothing, the scent familiar. You think about the contest, the poems, the judges. Q. Think about the ink, the paper, the brush. You wonder what happens when the words fade, when the paper crumbles, when the brush is forgotten. What remains of the moment, the exchange, the care, the moonlight audit and the whisper of seasons. The moon is high over Kyoto, casting pale light across the tiled roofs and garden paths of the imperial compound. You are awake, seated at your desk in the Bureau of Stationery, surrounded by scroll boxes, ink dishes, and stacks of paper tied with silk cords. Tonight is the quarterly Audita quiet ritual of counting, checking, and recording that few notice, but all depend on you begin with the paper. The cedar cabinets creak softly as you open them, releasing the faint scent of wood and ink. You count each stack, noting the type, the color, the condition. Pale green sheets for spring poems, rust ones for autumn, white embossed paper for imperial notices. You find a discrepancy, 3 sheets of plum-dyed paper missing. Q. Check the ledger, trace the last withdrawal and find the entry. Lady Shikibu, moon viewing banquet, 3rd night of the 9th month. You nod. The paper was used for a poem, likely folded into a fan and handed across a lacquered tray. Q. Mark the entry as resolved. Next, you inspect the brushes. Each one is stored in a cloth pouch, labeled with the owner's name and preferences. You check the bristles, the handles, the balance. One brush is missing. You consult the ledger and find a note, returned to brushmaker for rebristling Lady Akiko. You smile. She is known for her delicate script, and her brushes work quickly. You mark the entry and move on. The ink dishes are next. You clean each one, inspect the glaze, check for cracks. You grind a small amount of ink in each, testing the consistency. One dish produces ink that is too thin. You set it aside, mark it for replacement, and send a note to the potter. The ink must be perfect, smooth, dark. Anything less is a failure of care. You pause to sip tea, brewed from roasted rice and served in a small ceramic cup. The warmth steadies you. The moonlight filters through the paper screens, casting soft patterns on the floor. You feel the quiet weight of your task, not heavy, but present. The court depends on these materials, these records, this attention. You are not a poet, but you are part of the poem. You open the scroll boxes that hold the poetry receipts. Each box is tied with a cord, labeled by season. You untie the cord for autumn and begin reviewing the entries. Each receipt records a moment, a poem sent, a reply received, a paper chosen, an ink patch used. You do not read the poems, but you feel their presence. One receipt catches your eye. Ink ground during eclipse, paper dyed with persimmon, brush carved from plumwood. You pause. The combination is rare, deliberate, meaningful. You make a note to preserve the receipt in a separate box, marked unusual combinations. Q. Remember a story told by a senior scribe, now retired, who once received a poem written on paper dyed with morning dew. The paper was translucent, the ink faint, the brushstrokes delicate. The poem was unreadable by midday, but the receipt remained. The moment passed, he said, but the care endured. Q believed him. The audit continues. You check the seals, the stamps, the ledgers. You find a few errors on ink patch mislabeled, a brush entry duplicated, a paper stack miscounted. You correct them, update the records, and file the report. The system is intact. The materials are accounted for. The court will continue to write, to exchange, to remember. You step outside, into the garden, where the moonlight glows on the pond and the wind rustles the bamboo. You think about the poems written tonight, the paper chosen, the ink ground, the brushes held. You think about the receipts filed, the ledgers updated, the care given. You think about your own role not as a creator, but as a keeper, and you wonder. What happens when the poems are lost, when the court fades, when the ink dries and the paper crumbles? What remains of the exchange, the ritual, the quiet work? Asterisk the last brushstroke, and the memory of materials the season turns. The maple leaves outside the Bureau of Stationery have begun to fall, their edges curling, their color deepening to rust. You sit at your desk, the morning light soft through the paper screens, reviewing the final entries of the year. The inkstones are worn smooth, the paper cabinets nearly empty, the brush ledger marked with returns and replacements. Titchy. The court is quiet, its rituals slowing with the cold. You prepare the end-of-year report. It is not a grand document, just a scroll of numbers, names, and notes. It records the quantity of paper used, the batches of ink ground, the brushes distributed and reclaimed. It includes a list of poetry receipts filed, organized by season, each marked with a small symbol indicating the type of exchange: romantic, ceremonial, competitive, consolatory. Q. Tie the scroll with a cord of faded silk and place it in the archive chest. Today you will retire one of the brush racks. It has served the Bureau for decades, its wood darkened by time, its slots worn smooth by use. You clean it carefully, wrap it in cloth, and carry it to the storeroom. You place it beside other retired tools inkstones with hairline cracks. Paper molds no longer used, stamps whose symbols have changed. These objects are not discarded, they are remembered. Asterisk you think about the court. The poets still write, but fewer poems are exchanged. The contests are quieter, the gatherings smaller. The emperor has aged, and the younger courtiers favor new styles, new materials. You adapt. You request paper in different colors, brushes with shorter handles, ink with a sharper tone. You update the ledger, revise the inventory, adjust the receipts. The system evolves, but some things remain. The care, the attention, the quiet authority of materials. You grind ink with the same rhythm, count paper with the same precision, file receipts with the same respect. You believe that the act of recording is itself a kind of poetry, a way of saying that the moment mattered. You remember a final story, told by a courier who once delivered a poem to a distant province. The poem was written on paper, dyed with big iris petals, folded into a fan, sealed with wax. The recipient was a retired courtier, living in a small house by a river. He read the poem, then sent back a single line. The paper still carries the scent. The receipt recorded the exchange, but not the scent. You believed him. You sit in the garden, watching the wind move through the bamboo. You sip tea brewed with roasted barley, the warmth settling in your chest. You think about the ink, the paper, the brushes, the receipts. You think about the poets, the scribes, the couriers, the recipients. You think about your own role not as a writer, but as a witness, and you wonder, in a world where words fade and materials decay, what endures? Is it the poem, the paper, the brush, or the memory of the care that shaped them? Swahili coral stone houses and the small rules of coastal hospitality, asterisk door frames, coconut bowls, and the architecture of welcome you begin in the shade of a carved doorway. The coral stone cool beneath your feet, the sea breeze threading through narrow alleys lined with plastered walls. The town is Kilwa, or perhaps Mombasa, or Lamuan of the Swahili settlements that dot the East African coast in the 14th century, where trade winds carry dhows from Arabia, India, and beyond. You are a steward of a household, responsible not for trade or politics, but for the quiet rituals of hospitality. The house is built from coral rag blocks of fossilized reef, quarried from the shore and stacked with care. The walls are thick, the rooms arranged around a central courtyard shaded by a fig tree. The floors are swept daily with palm fronds, the plaster repaired after each rainy season. The door frame is the pride of the house, carved with geometric patterns, Quranic verses, and floral motifs. It is not just decoration, it is a signal. A carved door means the house is open to guests. Your work begins before dawn. You check the water jars, refilled from the well behind the mosque. You inspect the coconut bowls for cracks, the woven mats for wear, the incense for freshness. Hospitality is not improvised, it is maintained. A guest may arrive unannounced, and the house must be ready. You light a small brazier, sprinkle frankincense, and let the smoke drift through the rooms. It is a scent of welcome. The rules of hospitality are not written, but they are known. A guest is greeted at the door, offered water, then seated on a mat in the courtyard. Conversation begins slowly, whether trade, family. Only later, if the guest is trusted, will business be discussed. You prepare the betel nut tray, the spiced coffee, the dates. You arrange the cushions, adjust the shade, ensure the breeze flows. These details matter, they say. You are seen. You remember a story told by an elder steward, his hands calloused from years of sweeping. He said that once, a merchant from Gujarat arrived during the monsoon, soaked and weary. The host offered dry clothes, warm food, kikseh, and silence. The merchant stayed 3 days, then left without a word. A year later, he returned with gifts, silk, spices, and a carved box. He remembered the silence. The steward said, "You believed him. The coral stone houses are more than dwellings. They are statements of rhythm, of care, of connection. The thick walls keep the heat out. The narrow alleys funnel the breeze. The inner courtyards offer privacy and peace. You know which rooms catch the morning light, which mats are best for older guests, which bowls are reserved for elders. You keep a ledger not of trade, but of visits. Who came, when, how long they stayed, what they brought, what they said. It is a record of relationships. The town is busy today. A dhow has arrived from Oman, its hull heavy with dates and copper. The merchants gather at the harbor, their voices low, their robes fluttering. You prepare the house. You sweep the courtyard, polish the brass lamp, arrange the cushions. You expect visitors. You do not know who, but you know they will come. The carved door says so. You think about the architecture. The coral stone is porous, breathing with the sea. The plaster is mixed with lime and ash, smoothed by hand. The ceilings are made of mangrove poles, lashed with coconut fiber. The windows are small, covered with lattice work. The house is not grand, but it is precise. Every element serves a purpose. Every detail speaks of care. At midday, a guest arrives. He is a scholar from Zanzibar, traveling with a small bundle of books. You greet him, offer water, seat him in the courtyard. He speaks slowly, his voice soft. He asks about the town, the mosque, the harbor. You answer, then offer coffee. He accepts, sipping quietly. He compliments the doorframe. You smile. It is the highest praise. You think about the rules. A guest must be fed, sheltered, respected. A host must be attentive, discreet, generous. These rules are not enforced, they are lived. You follow them not because you must, but because they shape the world. They turn Coralstone into community, and you wonder what happens when the door is no longer carved, when the bowls are cracked, when the breeze is blocked, what remains of hospitality, of rhythm, of care. Asterisk the ledger of guests, and the language of mats the morning after the scholar's visit. The house is quiet. You sweep the courtyard again, not because it is dirty, but because it is expected. The act of sweeping is part of the rhythm, a signal that the house is awake, attentive, ready. You refill the water jars, check the incense, straighten the cushions. Q opened the carved door just slightly, letting the breeze in, letting the town know The house is open. You sit with your ledger. A book of thick paper bound in leather, its pages filled with neat lines and careful notes. It is not a ledger of money, but of presence. Each entry records a guest, name, origin, date of arrival, duration of stay, gifts exchanged, topics discussed. You do not record judgments, you record facts. The ledger is a memory of hospitality. You review the scholar's entry. He stayed one night, brought books, spoke of the stars. He complimented the doorframe, asked about the mosque, drank coffee slowly. You note these things, not because they are important to trade, but because they are important to rhythm. The way a guest moves through the house tells you how the house is doing. Outside, the town hums. Women carry baskets of fish, children chase goats, merchants haggle over cloves and coral beads. The harbor is busy again, another dhow, this one from Hormuz, its hull painted with faded blue patterns. You expect visitors. You prepare the betel nut tray, the spiced coffee, the dates. You arrange the mats. The mats are woven from palm fronds, dyed with natural pigments, patterned with geometric designs. Each mat has a purpose. The large one in the courtyard is for groups. The narrow one by the door is for solitary guests. The soft one near the fig tree is for elders. You know these things. You do not ask guests where they wish to sit. You guide them gently, letting the mats speak. You remember a story told by a visiting poet, his voice lilting, his robes embroidered. He said that in his town the mats were woven with verses. Each line told a story, each pattern held a memory. Key sat on a mat in your courtyard and said, "This one speaks of patience." You smiled. He was right. The coral stone house is a living thing. The walls breathe. The floors remember footsteps. The door listens. You care for it not as a structure, but as a companion. You patch the plaster, oil the hinges, sweep the dust. You do not renovate, you maintain. Change is slow, deliberate, respectful. Today, a merchant arrives. He is young, confident, dressed in bright cloth. He brings spicy cardamom, cinnamon, turmeric. You greet him, offer water, seat him on the courtyard mat. He speaks quickly, asks about trade, offers samples. You listen, nod, offer coffee. He compliments the incense. You smile. It is a good visit. You record his entry in the ledger. You note the spices, the conversation, the mat he chose. You do not record his tone, but you remember it. The ledger is a tool, but memory is deeper. You know which guests linger, which ones rush, which ones return. You know which ones remember the doorframe. You think about the rules. They are not laws, but habits. A guest must be greeted. A mat must be offered. Water must be poured. Silence must be respected. These rules shape the house, the town, the coast. They turn trade into trust. At sunset you sit in the courtyard sipping tea brewed with ginger and honey. The breeze carries the scent of the sea, the sound of prayer from the mosque, the laughter of children. You think about the scholar, the poet, the merchant. You think about the mats, the door, the ledger, and you wonder what happens when the guests stop coming. When the dhows no longer sail, when the rules are forgotten. What remains of the house? The rhythm, the care. Asterisk, the last guest, and the memory in stone. The season shifts. The monsoon winds begin to change direction, and the dhows prepare to sail. The harbor quiets, the markets thin, and the town settles into its slower rhythm. You remain at your post, sweeping the courtyard, checking the water jars, adjusting the mats. The carved door stays slightly open, though fewer guests pass through it now. The house waits. You sit with your ledger, reviewing Vier's entries. The scholar from Zanzibar, the poet from Oman, the merchant from Hormuz. Each name is a thread in the fabric of hospitality. You read the notes slowly, remembering the conversations, the compliments, the silences. You notice Pat who arrived during the full moon, those who preferred the fig-shaded mat, those who brought gifts wrapped in silk. You feel the weight of the year, not in numbers, but in presence. The coral stone walls have aged. You run your fingers along the surface, feeling the rough texture, the small cracks, the patches of plaster. You remember repairing them after the last rains, mixing lime and ash, smoothing the surface with a shell. The house does not resist time, it absorbs it. Each repair is a memory, each crack a story. Today, a final guest arrives. He is old, his robe faded, his steps slow. He carries no bundle, no spices, no books. He asks for water, then sits quietly on the mat near the fig tree. You offer coffee, which he accepts with a nod. He does not speak for a long time. You do not press him. Silence is part of the rhythm. Eventually, he speaks. He says he once lived in a house like this, with coral walls and carved doors. He says the rules were the same. Greet, offer, listen. He says he has traveled far, seen many ports, stayed in many homes. But this one feels familiar. He thanks you for the mat, the water, the silence. You record his visit in the ledger. You write, elder guest, no name given, no goods exchanged, sat near fig tree, spoke of memory. You tie the ledger with a silk cord and place it in the archive chest. Q. Feel that the entry matters more than most. The guest stays the night. You prepare a simple meal: rice, fish, coconut sauce. You serve it on a woven tray with a small bowl of tamarind. He eats slowly, then sleeps on a mat in the courtyard. Q. Check the water jars, adjust the cushions, light a small lamp. The house is quiet, attentive in the morning. The guest is gone. He left no note, no gift, no trace. But the mat is still warm, and the water jar is half empty. You feel his presence, lingering, like the scent of incense after the smoke has faded. You sit by the fig tree, sipping tea, watching the light shift across the courtyard. You think about the house. It has stood for generations, through storms, through trade, through silence. It has welcomed scholars, poets, merchants, elders. It has offered mats, water, coffee, care. It has followed the rules, not because it was told to, but because it remembered. You think about your own role not as an owner, but as a steward. You did not build the house, but you kept it ready. You did not write the rules, but you lived them. You did not choose the guests, but you welcomed them. And you wonder, in a world that changes with every wind, what endures? Is it the coral stone, the carved door, the ledgeror, the memory of the welcome? Asterisk, Story 6. Andean Quipo accountants balancing llama wool and maize rations knotted threads, and the arithmetic of mountains you begin high in the Andes, where the morning air is crisp and thin, and the mountains rise like folded gray cloth against the sky. You are an accountant of the Inca state, trained not with pen or paper, but with strings quipu, a collection of colored cords tied with intricate knots that carry the weight of harvests, labor, animals, and time. You walk the path that links storage houses, colchos where maize is stacked and woven. Baskets and llama wool is bundled for redistribution. You walk with purpose, but softly. Accounting here is a quiet art. Your quipu is slung across your shoulder, wrapped in a cloth pouch. You stop beneath a carved stone marker and unroll the cords. Each thread is a color. Red for military stores, yellow for maize, brown for wool. Each knot -figure -8, long knot, flat knot is a digit, a fact, a whisper of transaction. You touch the knots gently, tracing their logic. The cord that began in a coastal valley ends here, coiled in mountain light. The task today is to audit the warehouse of Ollantaytambo, a site perched like a condor's nest above the river. Its kolkas are built with slope-defying stonework, their interiors dark and cool. You step inside, the air smelling faintly of dust and dried corn husks. Basket after basket sits aligned in rows. Some hold maize, golden kernels dried for storage. Others contain wool white-brown, gray sorted by type, marked with small tags of reed. Hue do not count like others. You match the kipu's knots to the basket's contents. You run your fingers over each row, each knot corresponding to a unit. You trust touch more than vision. The system is precise. A long knot with 2 loops means 20 units. A figure-8 knot might represent specialized textiles. You learned these codes from elders who spoke of quipus as songs, not music you hear but one you feel in your fingers. They taught you to pause before each strand and ask, what story does this knot carry? Today's story is logistical, a rebalanced sit of wool from highland herders and maize from valley farms. Too much wool here, not enough grain there. Your knots tell the solution. You think of the weavers of the Kipu's young women trained in the Aklawasi, the house of the chosen women. See, they did not record speeches or poetry, but facts. They chose thread carefully, dyed it, spun it, knotted it. Each cord was a line of memory. When a courier arrived from Cusco, they handed him a bundle that read like a report. He touched it, nodded, and left. A message passed without a word. You remember a story told by an elder accountant whose fingers moved like rain over the quipu. He said that in a time of drought, a scribe altered the wool quotas, ensuring that herders would receive grain early. No decree was issued, no speeches made, but the knots changed, and with them, survival. The quipu listens, he said, and it cares. You believed him. The inventory is complete. You tie a final knot, a record of balance, not abundance. You seal the kolka with a mark of reed and twine, then prepare your report. Spear. The quipu is rolled carefully, tied with a colored thread, blue for completion. Tomorrow, a Chaskia royal runner will carry it to the capital. There a keeper will untie the threads, read the knots, and know that Ollantaytambo breathes evenly again. As the sun dips below the peaks and shadows lengthen across the valley, you sit by a small stream, unwinding your thoughts like cords. You watch the water move around stones, adjusting without noise. You sip chicha from a gourd, its taste sour and grounding. You think about the knots you tied, the baskets you counted, the people who will eat because the maize was measured, and the wool rebalanced. And you wonder, what happens when no one knows the knots? When the cords are silent? When the memory tied into string fades with the last accountant? What remains of the system, the care, the quiet wisdom in thread? Asterisk Andean, quipu accountants balancing llama wool and maize, ration section 2. The scribes, knuckles, and the breath of the empire you begin your day before the frost leaves the grass. The air is thin this high up in the Andes, and even the light feels sparse, as if it too must adjust to the elevation. You prepare your pouch, the quipu coiled like a soft serpent, a bundle of dyed threads, and a small copper blade for trimming ends. Today, you will audit a redistribution center where maize leaves 4 coastal valleys, and llama wool returns in exchange. The center is nestled above the Urubamba Valley, its stone walls silent and dark. As you approach, a group of workers on quill from alpacas sorted by color, texture, and origin. The smell of animal oils mingles with smoke from breakfast fires. A small boy offers you a gourd of warm chicha. You thank him and sip slowly. It is sour, but grounding. This place has its own rhythm. Inside, a lead scribe welcomes you. His knuckles are cracked, but his fingers move deftly over a quipu stretched on a wooden rack. You sit beside him and compare cords. His marked for last month, yours for this week. You notice a variance and extra basket of wool recorded with a green knot. He nods. A family sent their share early. He says, their boy is joining the runners and needed a cloak. You accept the deviation, adjusting your cord with a knot of quiet consent. You watch the scribe work. Each knot is deliberate, a form of speech. A long knot followed by 2 figure-eights means this center sent 80 baskets of maize to a site near Lake Titicaca. A short knot with a color shift from red to yellow indicates the return of woven shawls from the lowlands, dyed in coastal fashion. Key tells you a whisper of gossip. A group near Cusco is experimenting with knotting techniques to encode not only numbers, but categories. They use a 3-knot loop to mark ceremonial goods. He murmurs, impressed but skeptical. The emperor approves, but we must be cautious with complexity. You feel the weight of this bureaucracy. It is not heavy like conquest, but persistent like wind. The empire depends not just on force, but on accounting, on the breadth between distributions, on the fairness of baskets tallied. Your job is not to command it, is to observe, adjust, interpret. Sometimes you must untie a knot that was wrongly made. It is a quiet thing, but carries consequence. An extra loop on a cord might mean a family owes more maize next season than they can spare. You ask the scribe about rechecking this month's wool, just to be sure. Outside runners arrive. Barefoot, lean, fast, they carry knots like letters. One hands you a bundle from the central storehouses near Cusco. You unroll it slowly. It is dyed red and blue, a report on military provisioning and cloth supply. A long string of knots indicates that a new road is finished, and provisions will follow. You add the news to your cord, marking the site as ready for restocking. The quipu is not static, it is an echo, constantly updated. You remember a story told by a courier once lost in fog. He said he carried a quipu with a triple cord, one for wool, one for maize, one for deviation. He said he used the deviation cord to record shelters and emergency grains he used along the way, in case the tally would later need justification. The knots proved my honesty, he said. You nodded. In an empire this large, the threads must speak for you. The audit is complete. You and the scribe sit under a sun-warmed stone, cross-referencing cords, exchanging nods. You leave a note, Kupf, for the courier to carry, a knot bundle indicating that this center is balanced, plus a request for more green-dyed thread from the weavers in the southeast. The scribe thanks you with a small gesture, a twist of his thumb over the topmost knot, cord, on your cord. It means respect. As evening falls, you stand on a ridge above the valley. The baskets are stored, the wool bundled, the maize sacks tied. You hold the quipu like a breath, knowing it contains the shape of a season, the survival of villages, the movement of empire. You feel the wind rise, soft but sure, and you wonder what happens when the knots are read differently, when the chords fray, when the rhythm shifts. What remains of balance, of patience, of memory in thread? Asterisk the keeper's cord and the echo of Tsaplitha. Final morning of your season as a quipu accountant dawns with soft mist slipping through the valleys. You rise early, sensing the shift not just in weather but in the rhythm of things. The llamas are already bleating softly in their pens, and the smell of smoke from the kulkas hearths is faint but grounding. You gather your last set of cords, the ones that summarize not just this week's audit but the entire quarter's pulse of movement. Maize in, wool out, baskets exchanged, paths maintained. You begin with a long thread-dyed maronda, official marker of imperial provisioning. The knots here are not your own. They were passed to you by the central keeper, a stern but quiet woman in Cusco whose fingers move as if coaxing wind through rope. She oversees the state's memory not through scrolls or speeches, but through chords like these. Her knots show what the Empire believes is happening. Your knots show what the Empire has missed. You sit beside a stone table in a highland storage house and begin the final task, reconciling the two chords. A loop tied once in her cord is looped twice in yours. A segment colored brown is gray in Yorotits. Not llama wool, but vicuna. A long knot meant to signal 100 baskets was likely meant to be a short knot meaning 10 baskets, but pulled tightly in haste. The code shifted. These differences matter. They mean the Empire may think one village has grain, it doesn't, or another owes wool, it's already given. Q. Untie and retie carefully, slowly crafting a reconciliation cord. The messenger arrives before midday. His sandals are worn, his breath steady. He bows, then presents a reed-wrapped cylinder containing a fresh report from a Kipu station further down the valley. You offer him water, then review his knots. His cord lists a disruption, a bridge swept away, a herder injured, a tax basket delayed. You make a note to adjust the redistribution order in your own Kipu. A single knot of disruption tied properly can reroute 5 villages, winter grain schedule. Later, you meet with a small circle of local keepers. Each carries their own kipusum dyed with cochineal, some plain camel hair threads, others with reed tags for tactile notation. You sit under the afternoon sun and speak not in sentences but in threads, comparing tallies, confirming reports, adjusting interpretations. The Empire's flow lives in this circle. Your silence holds logic. One young keeper asks about a particular code she saw in an older Kipu, a segment with no knots, just colored threads changing abruptly. You explain it gently. It marks a season of loss. You say, no baskets moved, but change happened. She nods, understanding. Not every movement is counted in units. Some are felt. You remember a story told by your mentor long ago beneath the stars. He said, the Kipu is like a woven shadow. What it doesn't say matters just as much as what it does, he whispered. Always leave room for silence. You tied a knot for that moment green short, loose. It hangs still in your pouch, untouched as the sun falls. You finish your reconciliation cord. It contains no errors, but it does contain questions to discrepancies you cannot confirm. One surplus of wool that no one claims, and a missing maize bundle likely eaten during a flood. These are marked in colored tassels, not knots, signals to the central keeper that the system breathes, not ticks. You send the cord with the runner. He tucks it gently into his wrap, like a sacred thread. You offer him roasted maize and a strip of dried llama meat, then watch him vanish into the mist. Q. Sit back, weary but calm. Your ledger is complete. Your knots have spoken. You hold your own cord now, a personal one. It's unmarked, not part of the audit. It contains your thoughts, a knot for the bridge washed away, a loop for the old keeper's retirement, a tassel for the girl who asked about silence. You will keep it for memory, not for the state. And you wonder, in a world that no longer ties its stories, when numbers live in paper or wires, what becomes of the knots that once measured survival and trust?